this is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law.
Have you solved the case of the IRS and how this came to be?
Based upon everything I've seen, the case is solved. And if it were me, I would wrap this case up and move on.
With this endless parade of distractions and political posturing and phony scandals, Washington's taken its eye off the ball.
Hey, welcome to the broadcast, everyone. Well, according to the Associated Press, and of course we know this is now fact, but I wanted to quote the AP article here because it kind of sets it up well. The Internal Revenue Service continued to target conservative political groups even after approving their applications for tax-exempt status. So even the groups that got approved, they sent them to a special unit in Dallas, pro-life groups, conservative groups, Christian organizations, a special unit in Dallas to monitor what they're saying. Now, I want to say that again, folks. A special IRS unit in Dallas was monitoring what approved groups were actually saying. There's also a vote right now to defund Obamacare. That's going on as we speak, and as our television audience is listening to this, major issues going on right now. But, Jordan, let's get an update from Washington as to what's happening on the latest with the IRS scandal, because it unfolded even yesterday after we were off air.
That's right. Well, the IRS now has a response for why there were letters going out as late as August 7th, just last month, from Lois Lerner to applicants for C3 or C4 kind of tax-exempt status. And the IRS has said, oh, sorry. Again, they've apologized. That was our auto sign machine. So that tells you how seriously they take these kind of letters, that they were having. Lois Lerner still was on the auto sign machine, the auto pin that does it without her having to be there with her name and her title that any group would have received. So I'm sure hundreds of those letters went out. And they said it didn't stop until August 21st. So they knew about the problem. They knew the letter would be out there. They knew a congressman would find it. And yet at the hearing, the commissioner wasn't ready to answer a question. Could have been the answer, could have been AutoPin was still operating. Sorry, apologize. Instead, it took the IRS going back. It shows how poorly run the IRS is and how bad the new IRS commissioner is as well.
Well, I'll tell you what else it shows you, folks. It shows you that she was on administrative leave paid for by us, and the IRS was still using her signature line. Still using her signature line. She's still on our payroll. Now, this, to me, is absolutely, positively absurd. The woman took the Fifth Amendment. She was in charge of your church's audits and reviews. She's put on leave, and she's still signing her name because of an auto pen, and the IRS says sorry. If you get audited, tell the IRS you're sorry. See what happens. Sign that petition to reform the IRS now and the abuse. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. That's ACLJ.org or 877-989-2255.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme. An out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. You obviously can tell we're in our studios today. We're about to record something with our in-house Sekulow live band. By the way, coming up in a few weeks, John Elefante will be on the broadcast. That's why we got the equipment set up. Lead singer for Kansas. Got a great new pro-life song as we talk about all of this. Now let's take a look at the trailer for the movie Tax Invasion.
Every year, Americans spend about $500 billion on tax compliance.
Yep.
As we like to say in Texas, that doesn't produce a single truck or tortilla. It's just wasted.
Are we going to have a nation that's for of and by the people, or a nation that is totally controlled by the government.
If men were angels, there'd be no need of masters. We don't have angels running these bureaucracies.
Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, they're horrified at this because no one wants to think, you know what, I supported one candidate, the other guy won, and now I'm going to be audited or punished or have my business closed down.
I was in our building and the knock came on the door, and the first thing I saw was a badge. IRS, sir, I need to speak with you.
An agency that's supposed to be working for the people was really working against the people.
There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
The very foundation of our government was the idea that we could criticize the government when we disagree. That's what First Amendment free speech is all about. The Founding Fathers had a very different vision than what the Internal Revenue Service has.
Attempts to turn this into a scandal have failed.
Somebody needs to shine a light on this mess in Washington, D.C., and we're certainly doing that here at the ACLJ. Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. Now, look, Lois Lerner's on our payroll. She was in charge of the tax-exempt organization, which impacts your church directly. That's the organization of the IRS that's in charge of tax-exempt organizations. Christian Ministries, the ACLJ, your church. When she was with the FEC, she was asking people for the contents of their prayers when she was doing investigations. The same thing happened in letters sent to our clients when they were being reviewed by the IRS. How do you feel as an American citizen about the IRS asking you about the contents of your prayers or the people you're talking with or your views on the life issue or saying it's all propaganda? The reality is, Jordan, though, the government thinks they can get away with it, but we're making a major amendment to our lawsuit right now.
That's absolutely right. And that is why, folks, what has happened this week in Washington, D.C. has fundamentally changed everything. Out of the 41 clients we represent in this lawsuit against the IRS, remember, we went from 15, then amended our complaint and added those additional clients to bring the number up to 41. Out of those 41 clients, 33 were on the IRS target list. Now we've learned that even some of the clients we represent that were eventually approved after, we're talking 2, 3, 3.5 year delays when the IRS is supposed to answer within 265 days. So less than a year, and they were waiting years, finally got approved. Now we're learning that there was an IRS team in Dallas, their investigations unit, that was monitoring these groups, and we know the specifics on the monitoring. We know that out of the numbers, again, like the big list, about 80% of the groups that were flagged to be monitored were conservative and about 20% left-leaning. So the whole idea, this whole discussion that this had nothing to do with partisan politics is not only bogus, it is a flat-out lie. Based on fact, based on things that all of these officials on either side of the aisle and at the IRS can read.
By the way, we have 123,735 signatures to our petition right now to end this IRS abuse. If you want to protect your church and protect your Christian organizations and conservative organizations, you go to aclj.org, sign that petition now to end the IRS abuse, or call us at 1-877-989-2255. That's aclj.org or 877-989-2255. I want to put this in a bit of a context for you. So for our television audience, we're going to play right now a video that we put together that kind of looks at all the major news breaks when this happened. We played it on a broadcast a couple of months back, but I think it'd be good for you to see it again.
Welcome back to Hannity. Breaking news out of Washington. A bombshell admission by the IRS. The tax agency is officially apologizing for subjecting conservative groups to additional scrutiny during the 2012 election.
We applied for our tax status in 2010. We waited 18 months. They sent these letters that wanting a lot of information they weren't allowed to ask us.
Send us your Facebook pages, your Twitter pages. And I said, does that include personal pages? And they said everything. They wanted to know your personal relationships with politicians and political parties. And they made an insinuation like, look, it can be considered perjury if you omit things from the IRS, and that carries with it jail time. I'm a pregnant stay-at-home mother on one income. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not doing anything.
They used names like Tea Party or Patriots, and they selected cases simply because the application had those names in the title. That was wrong. The IRS would like to apologize for that.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate. Wait a minute. I didn't realize apologies were sufficient in IRS-related issues.
Tell us about the derivation of your organization's name, especially if you had liberty in there.
What the IRS did here is outrageous.
It's an evil agency, and I hope the American people will get up in arms about it.
If, in fact, IRS personnel engaged in the kind of practices that have been reported on and were intentionally targeting conservative groups, then that's outrageous.
If this just isn't a gathering of an enemies list, I don't know what is.
The president needs to stop the if and get to the reality here that this was a complete misuse of the Office of the Internal Revenue Service.
Has a crime been committed here?
Have you solved the case of the IRS and how this came to be?
Based upon everything I've seen, the case is solved. And if it were me, I would wrap this case up and move on.
With this endless parade of distractions and political posturing and phony scandals, Washington's taken its eye off the ball.
Look at the situation here. Jordan just said it. We just amended the complaint, adding 41 individuals. We now are going to make a third amendment to this lawsuit because of the new facts that have been coming forward, which have been showing not only targeting but follow-up targeting out of the office in Dallas. This is hugely significant. We've got 6 lawyers working on this case. But you know what? At the same time, we've got lawyers from all over the globe working for the release of Pastor Saeed Abedini. And I want to encourage you, we've got a new website up called BeHeardProject.com. That's BeHeardProject.com. And Jordan, tell people what they can do when they go there.
Well, there's a couple things you can do at BeHeardProject.com. One, you can join our petition, which is having an influence. I'll tell you why. As we lead up to the UN General Assembly, our top ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, tweeted about Saeed Abedini. Now, this is during the talks while the White House is talking about a possible meeting between the president. I'm about to, when I leave the studio, I'm going on Fox News. And I'm going to go on Fox and I'm going to say the president of the United States should not sit down with the president of Iran unless some preconditions are met. And those preconditions are the release of Saeed Abedini, another American who's been in prison for 2 years, Amir Hekmani, and the location of that missing FBI agent who's been missing for a number of years, Bob Levinson. All of those things need to happen before our president, the president of the most powerful country in the world, sits down with this new, supposedly moderate president of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Let's see some real action. The release that he did, the people have been talking about the release of 11 prisoners. I'll be talking about that today on Fox. The release there involved people who had 2 weeks, 3 weeks left on their sentences. There was only one who had even more than weeks left on their sentence, one prominent. And that was, of course, all done for optics because he's coming to the United Nations. How about release the 2 Americans before our president, our American president, sits down? So this can't be a meeting without preconditions.
All right, so it's BeHeardProject.com. That's BeHeardProject.com. When you go there, you could find out about Saeed Abedini's case and others. But for Pastor Saeed's, what you do is you can just scroll down and you can actually sign the letter going to the Iranian president. So that's BeHeardProject.com. Jordan, let's take a phone call.
Yep, right to the phones we go. Let's go to Greg in Rhode Island, line 2. Greg, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live. You're on the air.
Hi, Greg.
Got a quick question.
Yep.
It sounds like it has nothing to do with it, but if you look into it, it has a lot to do with it. The question is, don't all 501c3 tax-exempt churches or whatever they are, don't they have a list of 32 to 37 things they're not actually able to discuss? And if they do, it takes away their status.
There's not a list per se. What you're talking about is a revenue ruling that the IRS issued, and the only thing that a church really cannot do, although I think it's an unconstitutional restraint on speech, is endorse or oppose a particular candidate for public office. So you can't say vote for this Republican or vote for this Democrat, and most pastors don't do that anyways. But there is not, these organizations have free speech rights. What Lois Lerner said, and this is what's so important. We have the soundbite where she said, people are asking us what to do. Can't we do something? And she says, no. And then we've got, of course, the email where it's the FEC saves the day. That's she's hoping the Federal Election Commission will come in and do it. But listen to the soundbite from Lois Lerner. I think she was at Duke University. We'll take a listen.
Everybody is screaming at us right now, fix it now before the election. Can't you see how much these people are spending? I won't know until I look at their 990s next year whether they have done more than their primary activity as political or not. So I can't do anything right now.
You know, she said, it was hard to hear, but she said, I won't know until I look at their 990s next year to see if they violated the rules. Now we know, Jordan, that she didn't just look at the 990s. She sent them down to a special unit in Dallas to follow it up, and that would include nonprofit organizations and churches.
That were already approved. So we're looking at, there's privacy issues on those lists. What we've requested from members of Congress is, can they confirm how many of our groups that we represent in the lawsuit were also on this list, this target list coming out of Dallas. Again, this is a different division within the IRS. This is investigations. This is something that Danny Werfel, the acting IRS commissioner, said he put on immediate hold. But the idea here was that if this scandal had not broken, and it hadn't been taken seriously, Lois Lerner would not only have been able to hold back these groups from being approved, basically shutting them down, but then the ones who actually finally were approved, they would be monitored as if they were some kind of wrongdoers. And this is the next step before being audited. So this is the step that the IRS takes before you receive a full audit, is being on the examinations list. These groups were getting approved, and without even having any time to act as an organization with approval, already on the maybe audit list.
Which, when you think about that, folks, you understand how angry the IRS has been at these organizations, and how desperately they wanted them to be put out of operation. To not only then target them for whether they'll get their exemption, but to then take it over and say, well, once they've got their exemption, we're going to send it down to a special unit in Dallas, Texas, to monitor what your church is saying, to monitor what the nonprofit's saying. This is absurd, but this is also the reality of what we're dealing with. And it is critical that we hear from you. We're getting close to 125,000 signatures on this petition to end the IRS abuse. I mean, think about this. Your church has been targeted, could be targeted, by a woman who's now on administrative leave but still being paid for by our taxpayer dollars, who was asking for the contents of prayers. That's what she was asking for. Don't forget BeHeardProject.com for Pastor Saeed. We're well over 67,000 letters. Our original goal was 52,000. We're not going to push that to 100,000, maybe 102,000, 104 before the meetings. There is a possibility, as Jordan mentioned, of a meeting with the Iranian president. What an opportunity that would be to get Saeed's case before that president and get him released. Again, if you want to end this IRS abuse, you could do that by going to aclj.org or calling us at 877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. You can also go to aclj.org. That's aclj.org or 877-989-2255. And don't forget BeHeardProject.com.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme, an out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. When those hearings were taking place in Washington, D.C., Congressman Reed from New York was really leading some of the charge here. Him, Congressman Kelly, and others. Jordan has just interviewed Congressman Reed. Let's take a look.
Folks, we are honored to be joined by Congressman Tom Reed of New York's 23rd Congressional District. Congressman Reed is on the House Oversight Committee, the Ways and Means Oversight Subcommittee, that grilled the acting IRS commissioner who was put in by President Obama after the IRS scandal to clean house and give a report, and gave a 30-day report that there was no partisan politics involved in the IRS scandal. And it fired up Congressman Reed, and since we represent 33 of the 41 groups who were on a newly released document from the IRS with 162 total groups, we represent 33 of the 41 on our lawsuit. We're in that list. We wanted to have Congressman Reed on the show, and Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for keeping up the fight on getting to the bottom of this IRS abuse of power scandal.
Congressman, you asked the acting commissioner a number of questions. I'll start with the one that, this email from Lois Lerner saying that the Tea Party was very dangerous and her comments on Citizens United. And he says he asked questions, but, almost laughed off when you asked him who he had actually talked to.
You're right. I mean, the dodge and trying to conceal what really happened and what Mr. Werfel was doing in regards to getting bottom of those emails. I mean, those emails speak for themselves. Lois Lerner clearly had a political agenda. She was using her position, in my opinion, in the IRS to accomplish that political agenda of targeting Tea Party groups, conservative groups, and that can't stand in our American government, and let alone in the IRS. And so we're going to keep holding her accountable, and we're going to get at it. And then to hear the lack of response as to what the response on that email investigation that he did was troublesome to me for a guy who's supposed to be cleaning it up.
And he has made the case to your committee, the Ways and Means Committee, as well as the Government Oversight Committee, that there was no partisan politics at play here. And he still yesterday said, I flagged it for review. I flagged these things for review. But when you kept pressing him on Wednesday at that hearing, he kept pushing back and saying, well, we flagged it for review, and I don't know what Lois Lerner, acting as if he's somehow now lost reality, lost touch with just basic logic, basic sense. And do you think he was put in place by the administration to do just that, to do a phony investigation? And have you lost all confidence in the fact that Danny Werfel could be any different than the past commissioner who was allowing this activity to occur and lied to Congress about it?
Well, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I try to come at it from a trusting point of view, but it's trust and verify, as the old adage goes. Ronald Reagan was so smart in saying that. And what I'm seeing from Mr. Werfel is he is kind of playing the administration's line as that this is a phony scandal, and it is not. And we need to get to the bottom of it. And I made it very clear to him that I'm going to hold him accountable for what he's done, what he has done in regards to this investigation. And, these emails speak for themselves. As I said in the hearing, we'll let the American people judge whether or not there was a political agenda being imposed here and manipulated with powers of positions of powers. And, when I think the American people look at those emails, when they look at the data, they know that this abuse of power was going on and this is not a phony scandal.
We're talking to Congressman Tom Reed of New York's 23rd Congressional District, and also taking a stand for all of us in the country who have been fighting back against the IRS on this matter. A lot of news that broke this week. You had this 162 group target list where over 80% were conservative organizations. 33 of our 41 clients were on that. You have the Lois Lerner emails and these exchanges back and forth. And Congressman, you got into a heated discussion with Danny Werfel. He's the acting IRS commissioner put in place by President Obama, one of two political appointments that the president can make at the IRS. And you kept asking him about something that Senator Grassley said he was told by Danny Werfel back in May 23rd. ABC News reported that he had asked her to resign, and yet he refused to even answer you when you kept asking him, did you talk to Lois Lerner and ask her to resign so that she would stop being paid by all of us the taxpayers?
Did you ask Ms. Lerner to resign?
I don't want to answer the question unless I got...
You have an obligation to answer that question as a member of this committee, else you will face criminal sanctions as a result of it. Did you ask her to resign?
I'm being told by my attorney who's sitting behind me that I cannot answer that question under the Privacy Act. I potentially can answer that question.
Why is that a Privacy Act, what you did? How is that a Privacy Act? I want your attorney then to be put under oath and get up here and explain to me why you are not answering my question as to what you did in regards to this investigation.
Absolutely, and that was what was so frustrating, because my understanding is that he did ask her to resign. He had stated that publicly, as you referenced in the public record previously, and then for him to start dodging the question and obstruct our investigation by hiding behind his attorney telling me he can't comment on that. My question was very clear. I asked him what he did on behalf of American taxpayers to clean up this agency and abuse of power scandal that's in the IRS. And when he had to hide behind his attorneys and say, I can't answer your question, Congressman, because my attorneys tell me I can't get into that. And when I'm asking what he did, just what he did, Danny Werfel did, not what Lois Lerner did or what Lois Lerner responded with or anything like that, and he couldn't answer that question, that tells me that there's some design there, that the administration is playing games and that they're not willing to give us all the sunlight so that we can get to the bottom and root this abuse of power scandal out of government where it needs to go.
Congressman Reed, where do you think we go next? Our lawsuit progresses. The list, honestly, we've told our audience, tell you now, Congressman, this. Because so many of our groups in the lawsuit were on that list and the reasons why the IRS was not answering, even one that had a possible denial, it never got a denial. It's still in limbo from the IRS. That this will fundamentally change. We may be amending yet again our lawsuit and filing a motion to do that. Where does Congress go next? Is it the IRS chief counsel whose name came up and his office came up in a number of exchanges? Is it the debate over Lois Lerner and immunity grants? Where do you think we go next?
I think all of the above. I think what we're going to focus on in the committee, in the Oversight Committee, is getting to the facts, getting more of these emails, getting the data out there. We're combing through it. We just got an additional, after this hearing, I think the pressure was on them to disclose more information, get more data for us to review. Because in the emails, I think it's really clear what's going on here, and they speak for themselves. And we'll get to the bottom of it. And I think also what we're looking at is an opportunity to see how far this went. And it's clearly not just a rogue agency in Cincinnati. Now we're getting into the surveillance program that the IRS is deploying out of Dallas that the emails go to that were directed from Washington, D.C. In a potentially politically motivated basis. And that's surveillance of these groups after the approval. So this thing is going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to come into the light of day, which it needs to be. And I can assure you, our office, myself, are vigorously pursuing this to get to the bottom of it so that we root this abuse of power scandal out of the government and hold the people that did it accountable.
Well, Congressman Reed, let me thank you for everything in your efforts, for your fiery grilling, which I think Danny Werfel deserved. I mean, he's someone that, I've said publicly, and I know this would be really up to the president, but I mean, he was put in place to get things fixed. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that's got the backbone to do that. Seems like the type of guy who, like you said, likes to hide behind his lawyer, invoke the Privacy Act after, if that was technically true, he would have violated the Privacy Act back in May when he first started his job by telling U.S. senators that he asked Lois Lerner to resign. So he would have been violated the law like so many of these other IRS officials. So, Congressman, we need more congressmen like you, like Congressman Tom Reed from New York's 23rd Congressional District. And, Congressman, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having us on, and let's keep up the fight and keep going forward.
Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast. Obviously, folks, we're following this very closely, including the amended complaint, which we're going to be now filing on this. So it's a major case. We don't like the idea that Christian organizations can be targeted in this way. That's going to do it for the broadcast this week. We'll talk to you next week.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme. An out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.